Agenda 21, the plan to kill you. Here he discusses weather manipulation as a tool of the United Nations Agenda 21 to displace populations and bankrupt independent farmers, to reduce global populations by placing control of all food resources into the hands of giant New World Order corporations like Monsanto. The 2016 catastrophic flood in Louisiana is the most recent example of Agenda 21 tactics, along with the ongoing drought and the related wildfires in California and the west coast of North America. The trademark of government-sponsored false flag terror events since 9/11 is when the vast technological resources of government agencies somehow fail to forecast a catastrophic event. In this case, it was a 1,000-year flood event of biblical proportions that was missed by NOAA, the National Weather Service, and the wizards at the Weather Channel. But we now know that the ability to relocate weather systems with electromagnetic weapons and skies seeded with conductive aerosols is the key to the creation of artificial global warming to deliberately increase surface temperatures and melt Arctic ice. We must act now to stop deployment of these eco-weapons in order to restore a natural global climate, to return rainfall to the forces of nature, and to stop the melting of Arctic ice by weaponized deployment of aerosol chemicals and electromagnetic directed energies.
Now, there was a film came out earlier this year called Hunger Games. And this encapsulated in so many ways the society where the global warming bollocks is supposed to take us through justification. Of course, if you look at the symbol of the film, it's the phoenix, the firebird. For those who haven't seen it, it was a world sometime in the future of enormous, total control, where different sectors were fenced off and people were not allowed to go in most of the land of the country. And they were controlled from something called the Capitol, which was an elite that was served by all the poor people and hungry people around the country. And we have a version of the Hunger Games, and it's called Agenda 21 Sustainable Development, and it is being orchestrated outside or through the United Nations, and it is a stalking horse, a Trojan horse for world fascism, as I'm going to go through and explain. Agenda 21 was agreed at the 1992 Earth Summit in Brazil, which was headed by this guy, Maurice Strong, one of the gang big time, a mate of Al Gore. And he said, Maurice Strong, this billionaire oil man, etc., he said, isn't the only hope for the planet that the industrialized civilizations collapse? Isn't it our responsibility to bring this about? What they are trying to do and planning to do is use saving the environment, which these buggers are destroying, to justify deindustrialization and the end of democracy. Anyway, this is the wish list in documents for Agenda 21 operating through the United Nations. An end to national sovereignty, all justified by saving the world, by the way. An end to national sovereignty. State planning and management of all land resources, ecosystems, deserts, forests, mountains, oceans, and fresh water. Agriculture, rural development, biotechnology, and ensuring equity equals slavery. The state is to define the role of business and financial resources. Abolition of private property is not sustainable, they say. Here we go again. How many times has this come up? Restructuring the family unit, children to be raised by the state. People told, this is what Aldous Huxley said in Brave New World, people told what their job will be, major restrictions on movement, creation of human settlement zones, I'll get to them in a minute, mass resettlement as people are forced to vacate land where they live, for reasons I'm coming to, dumbing down education, achieved a long time ago, mass global depopulation in pursuit of all of the above. And what they're doing to hide it is they're setting Agenda 21 organizations up in all local communities, all over the world, America, Britain, all over the place, and they're giving the impression that each of these is basically an independent local community initiative, when it's all being orchestrated through this organization, through the United Nations, called Local Governments for Sustainability. Get them off the land? Well, get them off the land through weather manipulation. Well, we're seeing this big time now. This is HAARP, the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Project in Alaska, now connected to many other similar things around the world. In short, it bounces radio waves of high power off the ionosphere in the higher atmosphere, bounces them back to Earth, and can do many, many things, including create earthquakes and, piece of cake, manipulate the weather. One of the telltale signs of an earthquake created artificially appears to be these colored lights that appear in the sky, or colored images in the sky, which precede an earthquake. And this guy, Professor Kosuke Haki, expert in GPS signals, he said in the mainstream media, 1 hour before an earthquake in Japan and the one in Chile in 2002, there were more electrons coming through the ionosphere. This is a very strange phenomenon. Well, not if you're dealing with technology that not only bounces radio waves off the ionosphere, but often punches holes in the ionosphere when it's doing it. And even in the even in the patent that was applied for by a guy called Bernice Eastland for the original HAARP technology mentions this man, Nikola Tesla. He was, in truth, the scientific genius of the 20th century, and he'd probably be the scientific genius of the 21st if he was still here. What he had done is cross the bloody line, which mainstream science will not do because of all the implications for the agenda if it does. That line is to cross the line into understanding, a greater understanding of what reality is and how you can use it to create all the warmth and power you need without, once the technology's there, without cost. And part of that is accessing the electrical level of the universe, what I've been talking about, and turning it into usable warmth and power. And what did he say? If you wish to understand the universe, think of energy, frequency, and vibration. He was making weather effects. His neighbors were complaining to the police. He was creating lightning above his home in New York. He created mini bloody earthquakes with thousands of windows crashing when the technology went more than he thought, and like kind of crazy bloody comedy film, he couldn't turn the bloody thing off and all the bloody windows were going. And he also understood how to create free energy. Like I say, accessing the natural power and sources of power in the universe and turning it into usable power and warmth without cost and without, if you like, carbon dioxide. Now, the same bloody people that are saying we must do all this to save the world from carbon dioxide are the same people that have been suppressing this technology for bloody decade after decade after decade. Now, in terms of weather manipulation, Dr. Richard Day, the 1969 man, he actually worked on weapon manipulation in the US military during World War II. And the BBC recently did a radio documentary in which they exposed that the Great Flood at Lynmouth in 1952, when they had 250 times the rainfall, and it created this massive wave of water that came through the village, killing 35 people, was actually done by the RAF. They called it Operation Cumulus, also Operation Witch Doctor, and it was manipulated on purpose as an experiment on weather manipulation. It's been going on that long and earlier. Here is a US Air Force document, 1996. It describes the artificial creation of floods, hurricanes, droughts, and earthquakes, and continues. Weather modification will become a part of domestic and international security and could be done unilaterally. It could have offensive and defensive applications and even be used for deterrence purposes. The ability to generate precipitation, fog, storms on Earth, to modify space weather, and the production of artificial weather all are part of an integrated set of military technologies. Now, of course, most people will now be bloody aware, my God, were we bombarded this year or what, with chemtrails, not contrails, which disappear, condensation trails, chemtrails that don't disappear if they come out the back of these bloody aircraft. They stay around and they come out and eventually drop to the earth, and they have strontium, they have aluminium, they have barium. It's acidifying water, it's acidifying the land, and it is causing tremendous impacts on human health. Cumulatively, again, the coal. But it's doing something else. In the HAARP patents and specifications, etc., in the description of a researcher describing and summarizing what it said this: dispersed metallic particles such as aluminium, barium, and strontium, the main chemical ingredients of chemtrails, or ingredients of chemtrails, may increase the atmosphere's conductivity and therefore enhance HAARP's weather modification performance. So it's doing that as well. So where am I going with this? Well, I'm going here. Dr. Richard Day, 1969, the weather will be modified and used as a weapon of war to create drought or famine. A weapon of war against who? In Agenda 21 terms, a weapon of war against the small farmers, landowners, and growers of the world, not least in America. We have had in America this massive drought this year, which has devastated small independent farmers and growers. Of course, the big bloody corporations can cope with it, got unlimited bloody funds when they're part of the agenda. And so, also, in 2011 and other times, we've had these extraordinary forests of tornadoes. It was about 300 in a period of 3 days at one point. I think it was 2011. And that, of course, is devastating rural communities and what have you. Creating tornadoes with HAARP technology, child's bloody play. And what have we had in this country? Devastating weather and floods, which again has had a massive impact upon small farmers and growers. And you know, there was a report for the European Parliament, a European Parliament committee in the 1990s, about HAARP, which was actually quite good because it was saying, hold on a minute, we don't like this. And one of the things it was saying is that HAARP technology had the ability to manipulate the jet stream and change weather patterns. Well, when you look at the meteorological explanation for the great deluge in Britain this summer, they say extraordinary things happened to the jet stream. And instead of going away and taking, dropping some and going off into Europe, it basically started doing this, which is why we got the bloody lot. And when the farmers and growers collapse, in come the big agribusiness people, the network, to take over the land for cents on the dollar. Also, we're having this devastating impact upon the bee population around the world. Monsanto, another word for bloody evil. And the other part of this is to create food shortages. Food shortages because it's not there, because of the production, and food shortages that people simply cannot afford it because it's so bloody expensive. And control if they eat, and their hearts and minds will follow. This is all part of the control system that they're bringing on. Get them off the land. 3, financially, get them off the land. They can't afford to stay there anymore. There you go. There you go. This is the. This is where we're at. Hunger Games, Agenda 21 or what? 3.5 million homeless, 18.5 million vacant homes in the United States. There you go. Oh, you're poor. What a joke. Woman in £1 million hat makes speech about austerity. Praying for starving children while sitting on a golden throne. This is the dynamic between people, politicians, and banks. These answer to the same masters, thus they change legislation to suit them and screw them. This is how it works through this system. This is why the governments are not doing what's right for people, economically or any other way. They're doing it for that which they represent. Politics, banking, and all their other stuff. One global unit. As this guy, I won't say it again, but this guy was talking about all the Satanists in banking. And this guy said, the system isn't broken, it was built this way. Of course it was.
This is an excerpt from David Icke's video called Agenda 21, The Plan to Kill You. Here he discusses whether manipulation is a tool of the United Nations Agenda 21 to displace populations and bankrupt independent farmers, to reduce global populations by placing control of all food resources into the hands of giant New World Order corporations like Monsanto. The 2016 catastrophic flood in Louisiana is the most recent example of Agenda 21 tactics, along with the ongoing drought and the related wildfires in California and the west coast of North America. The trademark of government-sponsored false flag terror events since 9/11 is when the vast technological resources of government agencies somehow fail to forecast a catastrophic event. In this case, it was a 1,000-year flood event of biblical proportions that was missed by NOAA, the National Weather Service, and the wizards at the Weather Channel. But we now know that the ability to relocate weather systems with electromagnetic weapons and skies seeded with conductive aerosols is the key to the creation of artificial global warming to deliberately increase surface temperatures and melt Arctic ice. We must act now to stop deployment of these eco-weapons in order to restore a natural global climate, to return rainfall to the forces of nature, and to stop the melting of Arctic ice by weaponized deployment of aerosol chemicals and electromagnetic directed energies.
Now, there was a film came out earlier this year called Hunger Games. And this encapsulated in so many ways the society where the global warming bollocks is supposed to take us through justification. Of course, if you look at the symbol of the